I still remember the first time I met Daniel. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon at the cafe near my university campus in Leeds. I'd spilt my coffee all over my notes, cursing under my breath, when he appeared out of nowhere with napkins and a warm, crooked smile. "Rough day?" he asked, his Yorkshire accent soft but clear. That was the beginning. From then on, it was late-night walks, shared playlists, and stolen kisses in quiet corridors. Daniel was charming, attentive, and always made me feel seen. We dated for 2 years before he invited me to spend Christmas with his family in Surrey. I was nervous, of course. Meeting your partner's family was always a big step. But Daniel assured me they were kind, just a little traditional. "Don't worry," he said, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "They'll love you." The drive down south was long, and the tension in my stomach only grew. His family had moved to the UK from Bulgaria when he was a child, and while Daniel spoke English perfectly, he often switched to Bulgarian with his parents and siblings. I'd always wondered what they were saying, but Daniel would just chuckle and say, "Nothing important." When we pulled up outside a large brick house nestled on a quiet street, I took a deep breath. His mother, Ivana, opened the door before we even rang the bell. She was elegant, with piercing eyes and a tight smile that didn't quite reach them. She greeted Daniel with a warm hug and a flurry of words I didn't understand, then turned to me. "You must be Emily," she said in clipped English. "Come in." Inside, the house was beautifully decorated for the holidays, glittering lights, the scent of cinnamon, a roaring fire. I tried to make a good impression, complimenting the decor and offering to help in the kitchen. Ivana nodded politely, but I noticed how she and her daughter Katia exchanged looks and spoke in rapid Bulgarian whenever I turned my back. At dinner, I sat quietly while the family conversed mostly in their native language. Daniel occasionally translated, but I still felt like a guest at someone else's party, an outsider. When I laughed at a joke his father made, everyone stared. Daniel leaned in and whispered, "It wasn't that funny, love." Later that evening, as we sat around the tree opening presents, Katia said something that made the entire family burst into laughter. I smiled nervously, assuming it was a shared memory. But when I looked at Daniel, I caught a flicker of discomfort in his expression. "What did she say?" I asked, my voice light but curious. "Just a joke," he muttered. "Nothing worth translating." But something in his eyes told me he was lying. Something was off. And I wasn't sure I wanted to know the truth. The next morning, I woke early. The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the heating and the occasional creak of floorboards. I slipped downstairs, hoping for a moment alone before the day began. But as I reached the kitchen, I heard voices, low, hurried, and definitely not in English. I paused just outside the doorway. It was Ivana and Katia. Their tone was sharp, almost scolding, and I caught my name, Emily, spoken with distaste. I didn't understand the words, but I didn't need to. The meaning was clear in their voices. When I stepped in, they stopped abruptly. Ivana smiled stiffly and gestured toward the kettle. "Would you like tea?" she asked. I nodded, pretending I hadn't heard a thing. That set the tone for the next few days. Every time I walked into a room, the conversation would shift or fall silent. Daniel noticed, I could tell. But whenever I tried to bring it up, he brushed it aside. "It's just cultural," he'd say. "They're not used to outsiders." Outsiders. That word stung more than I expected. On Christmas Eve, the family gathered for dinner again. This time there were more relatives, uncles, aunts, cousins. I tried to join in, smiling, laughing, offering help. But the laughter never quite reached me. They spoke over me, around me, in a language I couldn't grasp. And then it happened. One of the younger cousins, no older than 10, pointed at me and asked something in Bulgarian. The room erupted into laughter again. This time it was different. Sharper. Crueler. I turned to Daniel. "What did he say?" Daniel shifted in his seat. "Emily, tell me." He hesitated. "He asked if you were the maid." The laughter still rang in my ears. My cheeks burned. I stood up, the chair scraping behind me. "I need some air." Outside, the cold bit into my skin, but it was a relief. At least the wind didn't laugh at me. At least the night didn't whisper things I couldn't understand. A few minutes later, Daniel joined me. "I'm sorry," he said. "They don't mean it the way it sounds." I stared at him. "Then how do they mean it?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached for my hand. But for the first time since we'd met, I didn't reach back. The morning after Christmas, I stayed in bed longer than usual. The thought of facing them again, of hearing that language swirl around me like a private joke, made my stomach twist. Daniel tried to coax me downstairs, but I shook my head. "I just need some space," I told him. He lingered at the door, unsure, then left me to my thoughts. By midday, I ventured downstairs. The living room was alive with conversation and clinking glasses. I offered a faint smile and sat in the corner. Katya and Ivana glanced my way, then resumed their conversation, in Bulgarian, of course. Daniel stood across the room, laughing with his father. He hadn't noticed me. I couldn't help but wonder, was this how it would always be? On the outside looking in? Later that evening, while helping to clear up in the kitchen, I overheard something that shifted everything. Katya and Ivana were speaking again, quickly, heatedly. My name came up, Emily, followed by a laugh. Then Katya said a word I recognized. Naivna. Naive. I froze. That word needed no translation. They didn't see me standing there. Or if they did, they didn't care. Back upstairs, I confronted Daniel. "Your cousin thinks I'm naive. Your mom laughs behind my back." "I hear it, Daniel. I feel it." He looked weary. "You're overthinking it." "I'm not overthinking. I'm understanding. Slowly. Piece by piece." He sighed, rubbing his face. "It's just family dynamics. It's complicated." "No," I said firmly. "It's exclusion. And you're letting it happen." That night, I lay in bed wide awake, while Daniel slept soundly beside me. I stared at the ceiling, wondering how love could feel so lonely. In this house full of people, I had never felt more alone. But the worst came the next day. We were gathered in the living room when Ivana called Daniel over. She handed him her phone, showing him something on the screen. They both laughed. Then she looked at me and said something in Bulgarian. Everyone laughed with her. I turned to Daniel. "What did she say?" He hesitated. "She said, you dress like you shop in a charity bin." My heart sank. Laughter surrounded me, but none of it was mine. This time, I didn't say a word. I stood up and walked out the front door. The icy wind hit my face as I stepped outside, but it was nothing compared to the cold burning inside me. I walked down the quiet street of Daniel's family estate, wrapped in nothing but my cardigan and pride. The sound of laughter still echoed faintly behind me, as though it were following me like a shadow I couldn't shake. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. After several minutes, I ended up on a bench at the edge of a small park, trees stripped bare and frost dusting the grass. My fingers numbed as I clutched my phone, scrolling through train schedules. I just wanted to go home. But where was home now? An hour passed before Daniel found me. He stood silently at first, then slowly sat beside me. He offered his coat. I didn't take it. "I shouldn't have laughed," he said, finally. "I didn't think it would upset you like that." "It's not just the joke, Daniel. It's everything. The language, the glances, the silences that feel louder than words." He exhaled, staring out at the frosted trees. "They don't mean to hurt you. That's just how they are." "And you?" I asked, turning to him. "What about how you are? Do you see me? Do you hear me?" He looked at me, and for a flicker of a second, I saw uncertainty in his eyes. A kind of helplessness that frightened me more than anger ever could. "I want to make this right," he said softly. "Then start trying," I said. "Because I can't be the only one fighting to belong." Back at the house, silence greeted us. His mother and cousins were in the dining room, their chatter subdued. They barely looked at me as I passed. Daniel reached for my hand before we went upstairs. It was a small gesture, but I didn't pull away. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the version of love we'd built. Was it just something we wanted to be enough? because right now it felt like it was built on compromise, and I was the only one compromising. And still, I stayed. The next morning arrived with a heavy stillness. Sunlight crept through the curtains, but it did little to lift the weight that pressed on my chest. Daniel had already gone downstairs. I could hear faint voices drifting up from the kitchen. I followed the sound, unsure whether I should even be there. But the house belonged to both of us now, didn't it? As I reached the bottom step, I paused. The voices became clearer. Daniel's mother, his aunt, and one of his cousins were speaking in their native language again. I could only catch a few words, but the tone was unmistakable. Mocking. Dismissive. My name slipped in between the foreign syllables like a knife. She doesn't understand, one of them said in English, chuckling. I wonder how long this one will last, another added. Then laughter. Something inside me cracked. I walked into the kitchen. The laughter stopped. Cups clinked awkwardly against saucers. No one looked at me directly. Morning, I said, with a smile so tight it could cut glass. Daniel turned from the counter, mug in hand, clearly sensing the tension. He gave me a hesitant smile. Sleep all right? Not really, I replied. But I suppose that's to be expected when you're surrounded by strangers pretending you don't exist. A beat of silence followed. His mother stood, smoothing down her blouse. We were just having a little chat. In a language I don't speak, I said quietly but firmly. How considerate. Daniel looked uncomfortable, shifting from foot to foot. Mom, maybe we can… No. I cut in. Let's not sweep it under the rug again. I turned to his mother. I've tried to be polite. I've tried to be understanding. But I'm not invisible. And I won't keep pretending I don't notice. The room was stiff with silence. His aunt cleared her throat. His cousin stared at the floor. Daniel finally said, maybe we all need to be a bit more respectful. His mother gave him a long look. It's not about respect. It's about differences. I left the kitchen before I said something I'd regret. Upstairs, I paced the bedroom, shaking. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run. But I also wanted to stay, to fight for the relationship I believed in. Later that evening, Daniel knocked gently on the bedroom door. I'm sorry, he said quietly. You were right. I haven't done enough. I looked at him, wondering if he really understood. Or if he was just sorry because I'd finally stopped pretending everything was fine. I just want to be seen, I whispered. And this time he nodded. I see you. But I wasn't sure anymore if it was too late. The days that followed passed with strained civility. I busied myself with errands and long walks through the chilly countryside surrounding Daniel's family home. The rolling hills and narrow stone lanes offered a brief escape, but the silence in the house grew heavier with each passing hour. Daniel tried in his own way. He brought me tea without asking, left little notes on my pillow, brushed his fingers against mine during dinner. But none of it could erase the lingering sting of being mocked in a home that was supposed to welcome me. One afternoon, I returned from a walk to find the living room empty, though I could hear voices behind the closed parlor door. Something in me hesitated. I never liked eavesdropping, but something about the urgency in the hushed tones drew me closer. I pressed my ear against the wooden frame. Daniel's mother was speaking. She's not one of us. She never will be. You saw her reaction. Imagine what the rest of the family will think. Daniel's voice was calm, but resolute. It doesn't matter what they think. I love her. Love, she scoffed. Love isn't enough when cultures clash, Daniel. You'll see. There was a pause, and then another voice I didn't recognize, his aunt, perhaps. She'll leave on her own eventually. Girls like her always do. A cold rush ran through my spine. I stepped back quietly and tiptoed up the stairs, heart hammering. My mind raced with everything I had just heard. It wasn't just thoughtless remarks or teasing anymore. They were waiting for me to give up. They wanted me to. That evening, when Daniel joined me in the guest bedroom, now our shared room, I couldn't look at him the same. His kindness felt fragile, as if built on ground that might crumble at any moment. Did something happen today? He asked. I hesitated. I could lie, pretend I hadn't heard his family conspiring against me. But something had shifted. I couldn't keep burying these truths. I heard your mother, I said finally. And your aunt. He froze. What did they say? That I don't belong here. That I'll leave. That I'm not one of you. His face fell. He looked away, lips tight with shame. I'm sorry, he said again. But I wasn't looking for apologies anymore. I was looking for proof that I hadn't made a mistake giving my heart to someone who would let me be torn apart from the shadows. That night, I lay awake beside him, wondering how love could feel so lonely. The annual autumn festival in Daniel's village was a grand affair. Streets lined with lanterns, the scent of roasted chestnuts and spiced cider in the air, music echoing between rows of stone cottages. Daniel insisted we attend, promising it would cheer me up. You'll love it, he said, offering his arm. Everyone wears masks. It's tradition. I hesitated at first, but the thought of blending in, hiding behind a face that wasn't mine, was oddly comforting. So I slipped on a porcelain mask painted with delicate blue vines and followed him through the crowds. At first it was magical. Laughter spilled from ale tents, children chased one another with sparklers, and fiddlers played near the church square. Daniel squeezed my hand, and for a moment, I allowed myself to imagine this could all be normal. But that illusion shattered quickly. In a corner near the cider stand, I overheard voices again. Familiar voices. Daniel's cousins, perhaps, their tones unmistakably mocking, made sharper through drink and cruelty. I wonder if she even understands what anyone's saying tonight. Probably not. But she smiles like she does. That's what they do, isn't it? My fists clenched, but I kept my mask on. I said nothing. I just turned away, my breath tight in my chest. Later, under the fairy-lit canopy near the old fountain, Daniel introduced me to an older couple. This is Mr. and Mrs. Ashcroft, he said warmly. Family friends. Mrs. Ashcroft smiled behind her mask. So, this is the mystery girl. Tell me, dear, where are you from again? Her voice held the kind of sweetness that could rot teeth. London, I replied coolly. Oh, but not originally, surely? Her tone was light, but the intent clear. I opened my mouth, but Daniel stepped in. She grew up in Brixton. It's London enough. Mrs. Ashcroft gave a tight smile, and I saw it, just a flicker, of disdain. I managed a polite goodbye and stepped away, pretending to admire the lanterns. Daniel followed, brow furrowed. You all right? I'm fine. But I wasn't. That night, back at the house, I stared at my mask lying on the dresser. Beautiful. Fragile.
False. Just like the way they smiled at me.
I was starting to see that it didn't matter how kind Daniel was. I was fighting a battle I didn't start in a language they thought I couldn't understand, wearing a mask just to feel safe. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep it on. The days after the festival passed in uneasy quiet. Daniel noticed at first how I spoke less, smiled less. He tried to draw me out with day trips and thoughtful gestures, but something had shifted inside me. The mask I wore had cracked, and the weight of pretending was beginning to crush me. One evening, while the rain lashed against the windows of his cottage, Daniel suggested we cook together. A quiet night in. Just us. I agreed, if only to avoid another evening lost in silence. We moved around the kitchen in rhythm. He chopped, I stirred. It felt almost normal, almost safe. But when he reached for the salt and casually said, "Mum thinks you'll come round once you settle in a bit more," I stopped stirring. She said that. I asked without turning. Yeah, but she means well. She just doesn't quite get it yet. You know, your culture, your sense of humor. Give her time. I turned slowly to face him. Give her time to accept that I'm different, or give her time to hope I'll change? Daniel blinked, caught off guard. It's not like that. Isn't it? I said, my voice low. Your family mocks me behind my back. Your friends ask where I'm really from. And now I'm supposed to wait patiently until they learn to tolerate me? He put the knife down. I didn't realize it was this bad. Because you don't hear what I hear, I said, tears pricking the corners of my eyes. They say things they think I don't understand. And you never say anything. Daniel stepped closer, guilt in his eyes. I didn't want to make it worse. I thought staying quiet kept the peace. His words stung more than I expected. You staying quiet is the problem, I whispered. You're the only one who could have stood up for me. And you didn't. He reached for me, but I stepped back. The rain outside grew heavier, as if echoing the storm between us. The room felt too small, too full of words we hadn't said, truths we'd both ignored. That night, I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling. Daniel slept soundly, unaware of the unrest growing in my chest. I felt more alone than I ever had in the city. I realized then that silence could be louder than any insult. And Daniel's silence had spoken volumes. The days after that argument were tense. I kept my distance from Daniel, retreating into myself, and he didn't push too hard to bridge the gap. It wasn't that he didn't care, it was just that we had reached an impasse. Our relationship, once so full of hope and excitement, now felt like it was crumbling beneath us. The weather, too, seemed to mirror my mood. Gray clouds hung heavy in the sky, and the rain never quite stopped. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Then, one morning, I stood by the window, watching the rain fall in sheets, when I realized that I had to make a choice. I couldn't live like this anymore, on edge, constantly walking on eggshells. I wasn't sure I could love him anymore if things didn't change. I had come to the difficult conclusion that I couldn't keep pretending, for his sake or mine. Later that afternoon, Daniel and I sat in the living room. He had been quiet all morning, sensing the change in the air but unsure of how to address it. His hands were clasped tightly in front of him, his gaze avoiding mine. I need to talk, I said, my voice tight. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. About us, I replied, taking a deep breath. About everything. He nodded slowly, clearly bracing himself for what was coming. I can't keep going like this, Daniel, I said, feeling my heart tighten with each word. I can't live in a relationship where I'm constantly battling to be accepted, where you're silent, hoping things will get better on their own. I need someone who stands by me, who doesn't let me face everything alone. His face fell. He reached out, his voice a low plea. Please don't say that. I love you. I just didn't know how to deal with everything. It's all happening so fast. You don't get it, I said, my voice trembling. It's not about how fast things are moving. It's about whether we're on the same side. And I don't think we are anymore. There was a long silence between us. The weight of my words hung in the air, unspoken but undeniable. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, visibly struggling. I thought we could work through it, he said quietly. Maybe once I thought so too. But I'm not the same person I was when I first came here. I'm not just some girl from the other side of the world, Daniel. I have a voice. I have a right to be heard, to be respected. And if you can't do that, then I think it's time we go our separate ways. His face went pale. You're really leaving? I think it's for the best, I said, my throat tightening. I didn't want to do this. I never wanted to end things this way. But I knew it was the only way to stop the pain. The room was filled with a quiet sadness, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The life we had built together seemed to unravel in front of us, piece by piece. Finally, Daniel stood up and walked toward me, his eyes full of regret. I'll always love you, you know that, right? I nodded, blinking back tears. I know. But love isn't enough, Daniel. Not when it feels like it's just me doing all the work. He swallowed hard, his own tears welling up. I wish I could change, I really do. I know you do, I whispered. But sometimes, change comes too late. And just like that, the chapter of our lives that had once seemed so full of promise came to a quiet, painful end. The days after our conversation were filled with an unbearable stillness. The flat, once so full of warmth and life, now felt empty, almost foreign. I moved through each day like I was watching myself from the outside, numb to everything around me. Daniel left for his parents' house, and the silence that followed was deafening. No more heated discussions, No more quiet moments shared over a cup of tea, just an emptiness that seemed to stretch on endlessly. I had made the decision to leave. My heart was heavy, torn between the memories of what we had and the reality of what was no longer working. It was difficult, so much harder than I had ever imagined, but as the days passed, I began to understand that it was the right choice for both of us. The flat that had once felt like home now felt like a prison. I spent most of my time sorting through my things, deciding what to keep and what to leave behind. I found an old photo of us in a frame on the mantelpiece, smiling and happy, captured in a moment that felt so distant now. I couldn't bear to look at it any longer, so I took it down and tucked it away. It wasn't just the end of a relationship. It felt like the end of a dream. The future I had once imagined seemed impossible now, and all that was left was the uncertain road ahead. One afternoon, I went out for a walk to clear my mind. The air was crisp, the streets quieter than usual, as if the world was giving me space to breathe. As I walked past familiar buildings and down streets I had come to know, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to think about before. I was free. I didn't need anyone's approval, and I didn't need anyone to fix me. I was enough just as I was. I sat down on a bench in the park, the sound of birds chirping in the distance, and closed my eyes for a moment. The decision to leave Daniel had been the hardest thing I had ever done, but it was also the most liberating. I could feel the weight of the past lifting off my shoulders, and for the first time in months, I allowed myself to hope again. It wasn't about finding someone new. It wasn't even about getting over Daniel, though that would take time. It was about reclaiming my own life. I had spent so much of the last year living for someone else, trying to fit into a mold that wasn't meant for me. Now I was ready to build something for myself, something that was all mine. The road ahead would be challenging, but I knew I was strong enough to face whatever came next. I had learned so much about myself through all the pain, all the heartache, and all the confusion. It had shaped me into someone who knew her worth, who could stand on her own 2 feet and face the world with confidence. As I walked back to the flat, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The future was uncertain, but I was no longer afraid of it. I had faced the hardest part of the journey, and now I was ready to move forward. With each step I took, I felt the weight of the past grow lighter. The end of one chapter was simply the beginning of another, and I was finally ready to turn the page.